Alright guys, so I'm kind of late to this Gavin McInnes video on Shane Gillis. But I've touched on a lot of these points on my prior videos, specifically on Shane Gillis and Dave Chappelle also, with their pushing the boundaries of bullshit. Like, these comedians like pushing the boundaries when they can get away with it, when there's no consequences, but they don't want to push the boundaries on blacks or Jews. With Shane Gillis, he learned a lesson about pushing the boundaries on Jews, because I'm sure they fired him because of that. I mean, he had a week where that came up, where he said the chink word against Asians, but what got him fired were these other jokes that he made about the LGBT community, but he also made jokes about Jews. One of the two protective groups in Hollywood that you do not fuck with when you push your boundaries, which makes you a pussy for coming out and saying you're pushing boundaries when you're not actually pushing boundaries. You're actually figuring out what the lines are and encasing yourself in around the boundaries. So pushing the boundaries is another word for, well, it's just another way of saying I'm gonna figure out where the lines are and I'm gonna do my material within the boundaries. You know, it's a contradiction, but you guys know what I mean. He's bullshitting. So Gavin McInnes, like a lot of these white conservatives, you know, makes a video on this dude, Shane Gillis, and it seems like, alright, that video wasn't really about Shane Gillis. That video was pretty much about Saturday Night Live and their, well, Saturday Night Live, NBC, and their push for diversity of including other people besides white and black people. So this dude starts out his video as a balance with putting out Leslie Jones, the NAACP, asking for diversity, more diversity on the networks in 2013, which, you know, when black people say diversity, they mean black people. They don't actually mean diversity, all right? But Gavin McInnes, wants to put that out there as a balancing point, because most of that video was pretty much about him knocking SNL for hiring other people besides black and white people, particularly Bone Yang, the Asian dude, and Lily Sang. I mean, I watched half the video, but here's my take on it. All right, so he's saying that, you know, Saturday Night Live is now having this agenda of hiring, you know, people based on race. And my thought on that is, that show's been around for 40 years, 50 years. Not one single Latino American, like a straight down, you know, average American, Latino American. Not one Asian American, not one Muslim American, not one American or of the Western portion of the world, aside from blacks and whites. He's like, oh, you know what? They're not funny, etc., etc. I'm like, okay, think about where the whole black culture was 20 years ago. All right, in you know, 2000s, prior to the 2000s, right? Like, there wasn't anywhere close to this amount of black people in the media. People didn't want to see them. That's what the producers, studio heads, etc., you know, put out. The excuses they gave is pretty much the same excuse that Gavin McInnes is giving in his video about, oh, you know what, we're gonna hire people based on diversity just on them being minorities. However, that's what you did for black people, and look where they are in 2019. So the excuses that were given was like this. You guys aren't funny enough. You guys aren't and this is what they gave to black people prior to 2000s. Okay, we're not gonna put you on a show because they want to see white blonde people. We're not gonna. Nobody wants to see this. We can't make money off of this. You know, you're not part of the population that, you know, people want to see, and etc., etc., etc. Believe me, that was an excuse that was given. All right, go back to 2000s, and there weren't a lot of black people on TV shows and the movies. Even rap and hip hop at that time was not part of the mainstream, etc., etc. All right, and the excuse was, we're not gonna put you on shows, TV shows, movies, sectors. We're not gonna make you top of the line mainstream stars because we can't make money off of you. Leading man, leading woman. We're not gonna give you the Oscars, no Emmys, none of this stuff. All right, it's a white club pretty much. All right, so they're trudging along the way. NAACP, Farrakhan, even Al Sharpton. I don't know, whether he had any kind of pull in the industry. They went to, probably with the ADL, went to the studio heads, protested. I know Jesse Jackson protested the Oscars. There's not enough of us in the media, etc., etc. All right, so they're like, look, I mean, if you were around, there were black shows, but they were shitty, stereotypical. They had them portrayed. They were portrayed a certain way, etc., etc. And there was not a lot of integration going on as far as, I mean, there wasn't one black dude, the best looking dude they could find on every single TV show or program like they do today. They got put like at least one black person. As far as I can tell, from most shows and TV shows, commercials, ads, anything, they got to put at least one black person, and normally it's the tallest, best looking black dude that they could find, or the tallest, best looking black woman they could find, and putting it on, on these mediums, ads, TV shows, commercials, etc., etc. Okay, so basically, Hollywood started putting them on shows. Well, started putting them on shows. They were forced to, coerced to. They got put in this certain amount of people, this certain amount of people, this certain amount of people, this certain amount of black people on shows, TV shows, etc., etc. They had to push the talent along, is what I'm saying. Okay, all right. So, it's like throwing shit on the wall and seeing what sticks as far as talent's concerned. And that goes for like all the talents, white, black, Latino, Asians, whatever have you. That's how the industry works. All right, people get pushes, they get thrown on the wall, see what sticks. The ones that sticks, those are the ones that sticks, etc., etc. But they weren't giving anybody else those kind of chances. That's like, they weren't throwing shit on the wall. They were throwing white shit on the wall. They weren't throwing, other shit on the wall. That's a bad analogy, but that's pretty much how that works. So like, we want our shit thrown on the wall, and the ones that stick, you're gonna push them up. We want more of, more shit to be thrown. Whatever sticks, that's the one we go with. That's how they do in Hollywood. There's a ton of shows that get canceled with, white people, black people, Latino, whatever. That's the way they do in the industry. They throw shit on the wall, see what sticks, etc., etc. And then, all right, so it's 2019, and they throw enough shit on the wall where, you see where I'm going with this. Now there's a lot of, black stars. People are now, so you gotta condition people to watch, to be okay with watching groups that they're not used to watching. So for doing that, for you to do that, you got to just keep on pushing them onto the public so that they're okay. So at some point, they're conditioned to say, oh, I'm familiar with them at this point. I'm familiar with them at this point, so I'll watch them. I mean, that's the way it's gone as far as how that's worked with black people throughout the 2019. All right? You got to condition people, to the point where, I've seen this so many times, it's just part of the landscape at this point. I'm not gonna, Steve Harvey's hosting Family Feud or whatever. Oh, he's just another host at this point. I mean, like 2005, he couldn't get that job. I mean, people weren't conditioned enough to see a black face to actually, want to watch a show with him hosting. I don't think. Or what of these shows are out right now with black people? All right, it's gotten to the point where they've already mainstreamed, their mainstreamed their image in Hollywood. They've already mainstreamed the image, not just Hollywood, but in America, to the point where they're like, oh, it's just another show. It's just another show. But going back to what what the topic was on Gavin McInnes' channel was that, his argument right now against, NBC, Saturday Night Live putting an Asian dude and Lily Sang on their show, he's saying, well, they're not talented enough, to NBC and SNL they're just doing diversity for the sake of doing diversity, but that's the way that worked for black people. I mean, they kept on pushing certain groups, you gotta do that. You just have to do that. You just have to push, enough of their faces, over a certain amount of time for them to go, oh, you know what? It's not, black, white, Asian, it's just a show with these people on it. I mean, I could watch it, not a problem. That's just the way that works with psychology, with how people see things. They know this. All right. So as far as Gavin McInnes is concerned, his whole show primarily wasn't about Shane Gillis as much as it was about, because they do this diversion thing all the time where they don't want to come off as racist towards certain groups, so they got to do a little snippet of some other group, and a lot of times they'll either do positive or negative. No, they'll either do positive, neutral stereotypes towards them, and then they'll just go on with their racist thoughts on this other group, which is essentially what he did. But I mean, but like I said, it has to be done. If you're okay with giving the black population the whole 20 years of maturing their identity in the media, just pushing it towards everybody, and you guys had no complaints about that, you guys are not going to have any other complaints about every other American group that wants to be part of the American landscape. All right, the media is where the American culture is pretty much intersect the social culture. It has a direct effect on how people see certain groups, especially if these groups are not prominent as far as population wise. I mean, it actually affects how people treat other people. It has a huge social effect on the population. So this is not just a TV show we're talking about. This is not just a joke. This is not just a movie. It's sending a message to the people that these people are okay. They're our people. They're Americans too. They deserve the same respect as everybody else deserves. All right, you guys going off on this as if it's just a TV show. They don't need this group, that group. That's not the point. All right, because black people in ADL and the Jews, they know the importance of the media. They know the importance of how the media conditions people and affects the way they treat other people. They know this. Everybody knows this, okay? They know this, all right? So all Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, Muslim Americans, Indian Americans, etc., all you guys, fuck this guy, Gavin McInnes. All right, do your thing. You gotta push your image for your kids, for your sons, for your daughters, for the dignity of your race. Because I've been telling people this is where the race war really is. Okay, it's not on the street. You going out and telling 3 or 4 people how it is as far as how you're treated, your situation, and how they should treat you better. That's not going to affect anything. It's really not, okay? You want to get to the medium where you have access to millions, tens of millions, billions of people where you can get your message out there. And this is what every single group is doing. They've seen how black people have used the media as their own personal propaganda machine, as their own personal racial branding machine. And at this point in 2019, where social media is now a large part of the consciousness of the population, these groups, blacks and whites, Jews, they can't get away with like bashing some groups while treating other groups as protected groups. They can't do that anymore. So these groups, like, you know, these people like Gavin McInnes see that, all right? Their criticism of social justice warriors, their criticism of these other groups like LGBT, women's rights groups, etc., is not coming from a place where they're like, oh, it's not coming from a place about jobs in Hollywood. This is coming from a place of, you know what, we have a social strata here, and they're seeing other groups climbing up that social strata and they don't like it. I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to. They don't like it. Like I've always said, that white people, well, whoever's on top, and at this point it's the Jews, the whites, particularly in Hollywood, all right, they don't care who's in that number 2 spot or under. You know, they don't, as long as they're at that number 1 spot, they're all right. They don't care who's on that 2nd spot. They'll swap it out anytime that they want. They're okay with that, all right? So when it comes to these other groups pushing up the list, you know, and they can't have more than one group at the number 2 spot for whatever reason. So they see these other groups coming up the list, and they're just afraid that they're going to get kicked out of their whatever, you know, social strata that they're in because of media, because of, you know, social conditioning, cultural conditioning through the media, etc., etc. They're absolutely afraid of that, because once you knock out their place in the cultural realm, as far as TVs, movies, etc., 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 you know, now it evens it up for everybody else on a social level, and they just can't stand that. All right, so they'll just go after anybody who's trying to climb up that social ranking, that social ranking has nothing at this point to do with which group works the hardest, which group has the most morals, which groups have the most ethics. It has nothing to do with that. Okay, it has everything to do with, all right, which group can actually depict themselves the best way possible? Which groups can get Hollywood to depict them the best way possible? Because it's like, at this point, you have Coke versus Pepsi versus A&W versus Fanta. You know, McDonald's versus Wendy's versus McDonald's versus McDonald's versus Wendy's versus Burger King versus Arby's versus you know, that's the way it is right now. Okay, it's a social either they were, over the last 20 years, either they were social you know, racial, promoting their race, or racially bashing the other races, and they don't like the fact that they have no control over their bashing of, cultural bashing of other races, because now social media has matured and they'll get called out on that. Every single one of these groups will get called out on it, whether it be whites or blacks or anybody else. All right, so that's why these people are so protective of the media. That's why they're so critical of the media and you know, what they perceive as social justice warriors pushing into their realm, so to speak. But fuck them, though. And by the way, Gavin McInnes, I've posted comments on his videos, and I think he's watched my videos. I'm pretty sure this guy has watched my videos, because I've seen a change of tone in his videos, as far as him being a little bit more fair in his criticism, you know, of blacks versus everybody else. Because I've noticed, it's like blacks and Jews are pretty much over the last 20 years have become a protected race in Hollywood. They don't get talked about as far as anything negative. I don't see these conservative groups that are going after LGBTs, women's rights groups, Muslims, Asian Americans, Latino Americans. I don't see them putting any kind of content with what I've been seeing, not in the mainstream media, but in the rest of the internet media, where black people are, this black dude was like, was probably like the most prolific serial killer that's out there. They didn't touch on that. All these rapes of white women from black guys, they don't touch about that. They don't touch on that. All these crimes committed by black people, the whole, Chicago having 20 black people shot up every weekend or stuff, black flash mobs going around beating people up in Philadelphia, and a bunch of other places. They don't touch on any of that stuff. And that stuff actually affects them as white people. It actually affects them as white people. All that stuff affects them more than any of this other stuff more than any of these other groups that they're going after. It affects them, but they're not doing content on any of that stuff. All right, if it's not positive, they're not touching. They're not going after the protected races, the original alphabet people, NAACP, the ADL. They're not going after any of that shit. Shane Gillis, he ain't saying the nigger word, because if he did, every single one of these people would be, oh yeah, that's right. He said the N-word. You know what? He deserves to be cut from SNL. That's just horrific. Even Gavin McInnes would say that. He deserves it. He deserves it. But since he said the word chink, Gavin McInnes is, then he bashes, the people who he victimized, pretty much. I'm gonna say victimized, because if he did it to blacks, he would have victimized blacks, and that's the way they would call them, victims. All right. So all these people just need to shut their, if you're watching this, just be fair about your commentary. Just be fair about your fucking commentary. All right, don't do this shit where you're going after groups that you can go after. Just a bunch of bullies at that point. And I've made videos and videos, and I wish that those videos had higher views, because it's an educational thing for you people. All right, it's not me just talking about certain things. I like to educate you people, because you people are dumber than shit. A bunch of robots. That's what you are, you guys, a bunch of robots. And I'm sorry to say this, but from what I've seen over the 20 years that the media in general, and how it's changed society as a whole. I mean, it's benefited certain groups. It doesn't benefit other groups. You guys treat one group this way. You don't give the kind of consideration towards other groups, because the media tells you to treat one group this way and the other group's not this way. And you guys are morons. You guys can't think for yourself. You guys are stupid. Absolute morons. Just think for yourself, guys, all right? Wake up.